Welcome to our new podcast series, Leading into the Future. My name is Randall Palm, and I'm Vice President of Sales here at Akamai Technologies, and excited to be here as we dig deeper into a critically important topic. So why this podcast and why now? As we've now settled into somewhat of our new norm with how our organizations look and feel post-pandemic, I was struggling with leading my team in a fully remote environment, ensuring a culture that took us 20 years to build wasn't lost, and not just coping with the new norm, but leveraging it. I've been fortunate enough in my career to build some amazing relationships with prominent leaders who come from different industries, backgrounds, and knew would provide unique perspective on how they're dealing with these challenges, which led to some amazing conversations. Throughout this series, I was accompanied by my friend and colleague, Kate Prouty, CIO here at Akamai, who I've worked with for over 20 years, who brought her own experience and knowledge to these discussions. If you're a leader within your organization, which can range from an individual contributor all the way to the C-suite, I promise you will find something within these discussions that either challenges your way of thinking, reinforces it, or falls somewhere in between. On today's episode, we are excited to have Bob Solis, the CIO at MIT Lincoln Laboratory. Hope you enjoy. Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of our podcast series, Leading into the Future. Once again, I'm joined by Kate Prouty, Executive Vice President and CIO, a good friend of mine here at Akamai Technologies, and really happy today to have Bob Solis. Bob is the CIO at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, and a person I've known for, 6-8 years, Bob, primarily through Boston CIO, right, who has done a lot of these sessions and moderators. He's usually the one doing the moderation, so we're gonna change roles a little bit today. But Kate, welcome back and good to see you. And Bob, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Cool. So I was going to do a big long-winded intro of Bob about all his accolades and whatnot, but it may be a little more personal, Bob. But just maybe if you could do an introduction of yourself and your background, and I can layer on some of the accolades and things that you won't necessarily bring up. But if you could maybe kick it off with a quick introduction, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. Always great to kind of go through your career and figure out what are the best things to put forward. And I've been at this a very long time, and it'll come through in the talk. But I've been the CIO. I've been a CIO for 15 years, and about half of it now actually at MIT Lincoln Laboratory. The first half of my CIO journey was at the University of Massachusetts as CIO for all the enterprise services across the UMass system. And I've been in IT my entire career. Not my original starting point. I was a biochemistry major. Didn't exactly know where I was going to go with that, but life sciences was my passion. And long story short, through a series of events, I ended up in IT. Went to work for a medical center, so I had a connection to life sciences, and I just completely enjoyed it. And I think that's probably a common story for those of us in IT. Yeah. I've been in ever since. So half my career, healthcare, and then the other half I moved into higher education, and it's been a great journey.
Yeah, when Kate and I were thinking about putting this together, one of the thoughts was getting different people with different backgrounds, career growth and all that, but also different industries, because I think leading a technology company versus leading a retailer versus leading a medical device company and higher education, they're all kind of last couple of years between COVID hitting and kind of figuring out what's going on and now what's next. I think it's really interesting to get different perspectives from different industries. So maybe just last 3-4 years between COVID hitting and walk us through the journey at MIT Lincoln Laboratory. I think I'm really interested to see from students and online education, all the things that have happened and kind of where you see things landing today and what you're focused on moving forward.
Sure. It's. I think, Kate, you likely experienced this aspect of the journey as well over the last 2-3 plus years. Is we're still talking about that journey, right? It's such a unique. It was such a unique experience in all of our careers, and I'll tell you a quick story on the beginning of it all. So it's February 2020. I get a call on a Sunday in the middle of the month from our CEO. And he calls me up and says, when the CEO calls on a Sunday, you take the call. Calls me up and says, hey, he's an engineer, highly highly high achiever, MIT, PhD, so on and so on. So he researches his world, but he's very technically savvy. But he calls me up. He says, "Do you know how to use this thing called Zoom?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And not knowing where he was going to go, but it was the beginning of the pandemic.
Right.
Basically said, well, the MIT university is calling all the the board together to talk about where we're going to go, and I need to participate in a Zoom call. So I walked him through it, and he said, "Oh yes, by the way, I'm remote. I don't have a laptop on my phone." So we got through that, and 2 hours later, he calls me and he says, "Okay, so now do you know how to initiate a Zoom meeting?" So I walked him through that again on his mobile device, and he was calling together the executive leadership here, specifically at the laboratory, to talk through what he had just learned from MIT. And as many of us, it was the beginning of the move to full remoteness. And I wanted to share that story because it was the beginning of the adventure that we were going to experience over the next 2 to 3 years, which is, it was going to be technology that was going to get us through this from a business continuity perspective, right?
Right.
When we started, we were focusing on the obvious, which was the health and welfare of our community. That included, all of our researchers, the faculty, the students. But then once we got a foundation there, it quickly pivoted to the inflection point of, okay, CIO, so how are you going to keep us whole now that we're all working from home?
Right.
Great challenge, yeah, because we know nothing about anyone's home environment, don't even know who has what level of internet access, and so on and so on. So it was really that story really launched the journey, and I feel very fortunate that it went as well as it did. There's a certain amount of luck involved in these things, right? Because from there on out, when we were promoting specific capabilities and technologies, our executive team was right there to support us in any way. And so it was. I mean, it was the most crazy challenge I've ever encountered, and I think for the CIO leadership role, it put us in a great light. If we were positioned, and if you were positioned in your organization to take on what was asked of you, it was an awesome opportunity, really, for the IT department, but also to do something really meaningful for the organization. Like, really, this is like, how we're going to survive this thing from a business operations perspective. So that's the kind of journey it's been, Kate, right?
Yeah, I think that resonates with me so much, because I do feel like it was a huge opportunity for the IT organization to shine, because it's not very often that IT gets to be sort of front and center, and to really,
in a good way, in kind of a good way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we're sort of operating in the background. If there's too much attention on IT, usually it's not a good thing. Right. So that's true. But no, I think it allowed us to really shine and show our value. And I think, we're going to talk a little bit about the role of the CIO and how it's changing and morphing over time. But I think this point in time with the pandemic allowed a spotlight on IT that has, I think, given us an opportunity to actually kind of change our position and change kind of our impact and our influence across the company. I think those of us, who survived the chaos, it ended up putting us in a better light, I think, and allowing us more opportunities to really drive strategic partnership with the company. So
yeah, absolutely.
Like a major brand initiative, right? In terms of what, because I do think it put, it went from IT kind of being, behind the curtain, making sure things work, and things broke, or, if you were in the spotlight, it wasn't necessarily a good thing, to really the business relying on you. So maybe kind of like pivoting a little bit to the future here. How, maybe Bob, we'll start with you, and then Kate.
Yep.
What do you do with that now when you have this kind of a springboard? You're, again, maybe attending, not even just attending board meetings, but speaking at it and being a thought leader at it, and your CEO, joke about the Zoom thing, but all of a sudden people are looking at you for guidance and wisdom, and what is next. So do you think that it's a springboard to be able to do more and be a bigger leader, or have larger influence moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
Or how do you perceive that?
Yeah. Great question. I do see that. I do see what's occurred as a springboard, right, for good things to come for IT leaders overall. Not just the CIO, right? I think I saw, a tremendous blossoming of our entire IT leadership here. I mean, everyone rose to the occasion, and again, to your point, Kate, right? For those organizations that were able to survive through it, folks gained a lot of experience and knowledge and credibility and trust. I do think one of the so many interesting observations, but one of the interesting observations that I highlight in response to your question, Randall, is I think the CIO today is different than the CIO 20 years ago, where CIOs, I mean, this is all a really good thing, right? The role itself is maturing into a true executive leader, right? And what I mean by that, in contrast to what CIOs typically was your best technologist, right? And in higher education, 20 years ago, the leader of IT organizations would have been, say, like a physics professor whose shoulder was tapped, and they said, "Well, you seem to know something about technology. You could probably do this. Why don't you do that?" And that was whether you had any leadership experience, that never came into play. But it's very different now, and I think that's been coming for a long time. But fast forward to kind of where we are today, in your question, Randall, I do think that this is providing an opportunity for CIOs to speak to technology for what technology can bring. But there really is so much more to it than that. And most notably, it's the people aspect of it, right? So technology can enable you to do things. But if you aren't, embracing it, or you aren't leveraging it for what it's designed to do, you're gonna have trouble. And the look is to technology, right? As well, why isn't it doing that for me? We had a lot. I'll give you one more example that hopefully that can articulate the point here. Is, as we were getting into completely virtual, right? Folks were participating in these Zoom sessions over time, and it reached a point where a lot of folks were saying, "Well, gee, I'm struggling with, leading Zoom meetings. How do I engage everybody in the audience? How do I ensure there's inclusion and things of that nature?" And I've been doing this long enough. I said, well, I kind of baited them. Right? I said, "How did you do that before the Zoom meetings, like when you were live?" And it was very fascinating, because a lot of folks said, "Well, gee, maybe I didn't do that really well before this either."
I'm more aware of it now, but I've always been doing it.
So this is not a Zoom video. It is. There's nuances to it for sure, but there are some basic things that hopefully you were doing in live meetings that you should be doing in virtual meetings as well. So it's not all about the technology, and that's where I think there's opportunities for CIOs and IT leaders to express that, right? The technology is awesome, but there's a whole world outside of just what does the technology do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's funny. I think I'll let Kaylee jump in, but I think that we're a very Cambridge-centric company, right? We have 10,000 people globally, 2,500 here, and there was, before COVID, hey, if you're not in Cambridge, if you're not in the room,
right,
like you're at a disadvantage, or you're not, it's just different if you're not there, and which wasn't an inclusive behavior, and we worked hard to move away from that, right? But I think that being remote, it kind of flattened everything to where everybody was remote, and so in thinking about some of the opportunities that COVID has presented versus just the challenges, I do think for better or worse, it kind of leveled the playing field. And then how do we how do you drive inclusivity in that environment? Is a different conversation that everyone has to be aware of versus just the people in the room. Right. So kind of a little bit of a side thing there. Kate, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, first, just to that point, I couldn't agree more that, this idea of leveling the playing field. And, I think the pandemic has created opportunities for people who weren't always in the room to now have sort of a voice and more influence. And I think back to kind of the the role of the CIO, I think, you mentioned gaining credibility and trust through the pandemic. And so I like to think about it as, no crisis should go to waste, because now we've built this credibility and trust through this crisis. And now we've got this platform, and we should, I think it's a huge opportunity for CIOs to continue to leverage, again, the credibility and trust that they built through, bringing organizations through this crisis, and really kind of building up that strategic partnership. Because again, Bob, you said back in the day, it could have been, some professor who happened to be a little tech savvy was your CIO. And now we really are executives that have a real strategic role in the company, and building that strategic partnership, kind of moving up that spectrum of the role that we play, sitting in front of the board, sitting in the C-suite, and helping to make strategic decisions is really where we're going. I think I like to say we're less about technology and implementing technology, and more about solving business problems through technology. So let's not talk about the technology, let's talk about the business problem that you have. And then we can figure out where the technology fits in once we kind of get a better understanding for what your problems are. But I do think leveraging this opportunity for us folks in IT is something that we should all be really taking advantage of.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, I think if you'd asked me 5 years ago, and if there was a survey that would be fun to do, get in the Wayback Machine 5 years, say, to anybody within your organization, is your CIO a leader within the company versus today?
Right.
And I think that the survey results would be very different. I would say certainly about 20 years ago, 10 years ago, but just pre-COVID, I don't know that they would be considered a leader. I mean, certainly some are, and whatnot, but I think today, I think most people know the CIO, know some of the teams, all hands meetings, briefings. They're there to answer questions about what they're doing to further enable the business, right? A little less around tech. I mean, I remember when we have a new building, we implemented, we were having some problems with WebEx, and so. The former CIO, every question was about WebEx. Like, that's not a strategic thing.
No,
it's me doing my job, and we were having latency issues and all this stuff. Like, that's not what that's not the conversation around. I guess it's enabling the business, but it's a table stakes thing. Like, why can't we get this right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I think before COVID versus today, that survey is probably percentage wise of are they a leader within the organization has jumped exponentially.
Yeah. I think, I absolutely see that happening. I think, I think about my own experience and peers that I've interacted with. You get this this feedback that I'm getting the questions that are being asked of me as a CIO. They're of a different nature. They're of a more engaging. They're of a broader nature, as opposed to there seemed to be a blip for 2 minutes in email last night at 10 p.m. What happened? It's broader than that, right? Which is great. So I think there has been this kind of leap forward for CIOs, which I think is good for not just CIOs but for the organization. On the flip side of it, also positive, but on the flip side of it, my observation has been that there's been a significant growth in the digital maturity of the average employee, right? So not that non-IT.
He knows how to use Zoom now without
yes.
Yeah.
They
8,000 meetings later.
I see the community outside of IT rather than there's some small glitch and I'm going to immediately pick up the help desk client services line and call. They problem solve themselves. So I think it's been really, really awesome to see. It's been this kind of like the minor issues are not there anymore in terms of us having to solve. So that gives us the opportunity to work on bigger challenges and bigger, more impactful things for the organization.
Yeah, that is such a good point. You're so right. When I think back about what our jobs looked like 10 years ago, it really was a lot of firefighting and just keeping things up and running and dealing with really silly technical problems as opposed to business problems. And I will say conversely, your average IT person is also very different. I mean, I look at how people within the IT organization speak and communicate and what they talk about and how they talk. And it's not techie, they are able to actually cross that bridge between technology and business and do talk with a very business minded approach to the work that they're doing.
Yep.
And not, I would say not doing the order taking, tell me what you need kind of thing, but more like, hey, let's talk about your problems and let's work together on solutions that make sense for not just for you as an individual, but for the company as a whole. And so I think, that's been a great evolution, and looking at, using data and analytics and analysis and really kind of more deep thinking. And it goes back to what you said, Bob, there's more room for people to think about things strategically and to do analysis and be analytical, because we're not just trying to keep email up and running, the technology is more stable. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a function of just building your teams differently and hiring differently, or do you feel like that's just more maturity of the organization and whatnot? Because I think that, getting more business speak, is that enablement of the current team that you've had? Is that, again, is it hiring differently, maybe looking for that skill set, that skill set of communication, and is becoming more important, or you're kind of getting into a little bit of culture and building teams and whatnot? But Kate, would you say that was because of, just kind of maturity of the team, or do you feel like it's more, the people that we're hiring are maybe have a little bit of we're looking for different skill sets than we were 10 years ago or 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Definitely. I think certainly as an organization, we at the higher levels, my leadership team talks about, how we approach, how we engage, talking about business problems, not about technology, thinking about how we're supporting the critical priorities of the company, not the priorities of like an individual. So I think it's a lot of that, but I also do think it's the people that we hire and even, sort of younger generations coming out of university, they're being taught different. The way they think about solving problems, it is different. I mean, there's definitely much more of a business minded approach to solving problems through technology. So I think it's a little bit of both. We're changing as an organization, and the people we're hiring in have a different mindset. That's my experience. I don't know, Bob, if you have.
Completely agree, Kate, and actually you stole one of my points. So I'm gonna say I completely agree, and then just augment it, which is, I watched. I totally agree that the younger generation coming in, they are being taught different skills. Let's say folks who are coming out of varying types of computer science programs, they are very much being taught different skills than 20 years ago. Where it was kind of strictly technical, right? I remember actually sitting on a panel. It was probably 20 years ago, and it was a venue where we were talking about computer science programs in university settings, and I was, an IT manager at the time. I said, "Well, this is to the faculty there." I said, "We're seeing, very technically skilled folks coming out of your programs and in your computer science programs, but they don't have basic skills like working within a team, adapting to change, shepherding change, all those kinds of things." And I'm happy to say, well, I didn't really think the answers were great coming from the faculty then, but I'm happy to say if we fast forward, you see that the programs have adapted to helping these students be technically proficient, but also to work in the kinds of environments that that Akamai might have, or MIT, where we need those. They call them the softer skills, right? But it's not, very little gets done as an individual. It is all about team cohesion to achieving a goal, and that's a good progression folks have had.
It's almost like, it's funny. I wonder if I wonder. Soft skills sound so passive.
I know.
They're not critical skills. You know what I mean? You wonder if that passive or that soft skill thing goes away at some point to say.
I dated myself there, Randall. When I said it, I'm like, I know we don't use that term anymore.
Yeah. But whatever term we use, but I think those, to your point, I mean, the skill sets that are going to make people successful in today's world require communication and working with teams and working remote with teams and a lot of things that again maybe weren't as important when I just went in my in my cube and just worked all day, like there's not that many, certainly maybe develop, some of the coders and whatnot that still do that. But I do feel like even at that level, the ability to communicate with others effectively, especially as a leader, as individual contributor, maybe it's a little bit different. But as a leader, I think if you want to be a leader, it's certainly it's not a soft skill or whatever word we're gonna use. Switching a little bit to kind of culture, I do think that in terms of good and bad, culture is something that Kate and I talk a lot about, and challenges we've had with, we used to kind of be very much, get in the office and work together and get in a room, scrum, whatever it may be. And, how do you replicate that in a remote world? What does your world look like right now in terms of remote, certain days a week and whatnot? And what do you, now that, again, kind of the dust has settled a little bit, you're probably getting into a steady state of 3 days a week or whatever it is, like what have you done to reconnect people?
That's a great question. And I'll tell you, I'll relay what's happening here, but I'm fascinated by the question. I ask my peers all the time, what are you experiencing? What are you all doing? And Kate, you've probably seen the same thing. There's all flavors of everything being tried out there. So I think that's, an affirmation that, there is no one size fits all, right? We haven't figured that out. For us here, we were here at Lincoln Laboratory. So we're fundamentally research. We have students and we do teaching, but fundamentally research. And our research was, the culture was pretty straightforward. It was Monday to Friday. You were here. We offered flexible work arrangements, and if a staff member, asked for a arrangement, we typically would be fine with it, right? But not many people asked, is the bottom line, right? So that was our culture, and we shifted to completely remote with the pandemic. And then as we, started seeing light at the end of the tunnel on the pandemic, kind of the year before, we were starting we had the conversation. So, all right, what is the post-pandemic work environment going to look like here? And it's interesting where the MIT Lincoln Laboratory landed. So we decided to maintain all of the flexible work arrangements that are available. We actually built an application where it would highlight all the options. We did ask every employee to work with their management team and select, a work option. So essentially, though, this is classic higher education, and it's a highly federated environment, right? So basically, you kind of set some parameters and some foundation at the executive level, and then you empower all the local areas to take those and make whatever they need to work for and that's what we did. We rolled it out and said, work with your teams. Do focus on optimizing, the best of the work requirements and personal asks. And as long as you're meeting your goals, we're fine with that. So that's the mode we've been in since last June. So it's going on a year. Yeah. And I'd say it is still a major experiment, right? Mm-hmm. The positive is many still really enjoy it, but we're having bumps. We're learning. So I actually just had a conversation this morning with a set of students, 20 students that come in for the summer from a variety of different universities. And we were sitting down with them, and I was asking them about their work arrangements. And it was interesting. So about 3/4 of them said, well, I'm being required to come in, 4 to 5 days a week. And I said, how's that going? They said, well, yeah, it was mixed, because a few of them said, well, I really don't see much of anyone because other folks are remote.
Right. Right.
Oh, so I kind of took note of that, and I said, oh, we shouldn't be doing that. But I asked them too about going forward, as you finish your academic programs and look into your careers, what would you look for? And most of them said, yes, we're interested in hybrid type of work. But, and this is not surprising, but at the young stages in their career, the vast majority of them said, we do really want, though, some level of on-site so we can bond and gain experience with folks, face to face, learn the culture, develop those relationships. There's absolutely something to be said for that on-site. And we're kind of struggling with that, right? So, because we kind of have folks doing one thing and then others doing another. So we have not figured it out yet.
Shoot. Randall, we thought that.
I know. Shoot, that's why that was the big punchline question about.
We
Well,
have
it is funny though, right? Because
the number one thing by far that people absolutely don't want to come back to is any level of an hour plus long commute. There was no one that I've met no one who's okay with that, right? We all used to do it when it was, you know, pre-pandemic, but everyone, even those that want to come in the office, they're like, I can't wrap my head around the commute. So they were like, can we alter the start and end times of the days? So it's all sorts of variations going on.
Yeah, I feel that because it took me 2 hours to get here, and it's reliably a 2-hour commute for me to get from where I live to Cambridge.
It's consistently bad.
Yeah, it's not like I just had like I ran into like there was an accident or something. This is just it is what it is. It's a 2-hour commute now.
I think the commute and lack in productivity and just the grind of it, you know, versus being at home, and whether you're going to the gym or hanging out with your kids or catching up on work or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, you think about a couple hours in the car, how many hours a day do you have of free time, you know, whatever it is, it's a big chunk. So yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I do think that you know, and Kate can explain more on our, you know, we're full flex, right? And I've seen this too, where great, we have, you know, we want to youth, you know, younger employees want to come back in. There's no one here for them to mentor with. You know, when I was here, you walk the halls and see people, and that was really the value. You know, it just became a nice casual way of meeting people and seeking people out. Even if they're here, it takes everyone kind of being here, you know, to a certain degree. So we're really, I don't know if struggling is the right word. I maybe it is, but I think we're trying to figure out how do you support the people that live, you know, 2 hours away, that don't want to come in, or when they do, they want to be thoughtful about it and make it really worth their time. But how do you support a younger generation who really wants that? But what they want camaraderie amongst peers, but they also want to have access to the Kates and people to sit down and have coffee with. So I don't know, Kate, if you have any thoughts on that, but I don't know if we're struggling is the right word, and I want to get you in trouble with our age.
Yeah, no,
I think struggling might be the right word, because I feel like the culture of Akamai, what we grew up with, Randall, is what has kept us here this whole time. I mean, there are lots of people within this company who've been here for, you know, 20 plus years, decades of their lives, because of this incredible culture, the incredible people that we work with. Everyone is so dedicated and you know, just absurdly intelligent, and having conversation and feeling that culture and the, you know, just the vibe of Akamai. It is kind of lost for the newer folks who are joining the company who didn't have an opportunity to really experience that. But it is a struggle, because we are flex, and we are 100% behind that, and we want to support people working, you know, where they can do their best work, and, you know, avoiding commutes. And it does, I mean, I don't know for you guys, for me, it's been life changing, you know, just being able to work, because I've always had this commute, you know, it seems especially bad now, but, you know, missing out on the things with your kids where, you know, they've got games at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, where I was never getting to those games. And now I can kind of carve out the space in my calendar to get to the game and then get back to my home office and make it work. So it's an incredibly life-changing improvement to the way we work, but we do have to figure out how to bring people together. And it has to be more formal, because like you said, it's no point in giving someone the opportunity to go to an empty office. Like that's not the culture we're trying to. And the other thing is, you know, while we were in the pandemic, we were hiring a lot, like I think a lot of companies were, and we were sort of like, hey, you know, like the world is our oyster. We can hire anyone, anywhere. So now we do have a pretty big population of people who are just not at, you know, near a headquarters. They're not near Cambridge anyway. So to say, you know, everybody has to come to the office is really not possible, because you get a lot of people who are living in locations that are, you know, a flight away from this office at this point. So it is a struggle and a challenge. And I was hoping you had the answer, Bob.
Well, that's not an answer. It's just maybe a thought. You know, in terms of coaching my team through it. I constantly emphasize you have to be thoughtful about it. So don't assume someone is either good or not good with on-site or remote. You've got to constantly stay connected and which is key to have a sense of how people are doing. And that was true when we were all virtual, right? So I remember having, again, back to the conversations across the community, you know, we had folks who are saying, yeah, I'm really struggling staying connected, right, with folks on my team. And I said, again, posed the same questions. How'd you do it before? And it wasn't great, right? So I'm like, well, do you have one-on-ones? Do you have at least 1-2 times a week where you schedule time with your direct reports? And they're like, no. I said, well, yeah, you really ought to do that. Yeah, you have to think about that connection. And again, don't have the answers, but recently we've had conversations to offer to our leadership team that it is not one size fits all. So, you know, I have folks say who have 15 plus years tenure here, right? They know each other inside and out. They've been together for 15 years. So it was actually very easy for them to go remote.
Yeah.
But when you have the 1 year new employee, it's different. They don't have that backdrop. So in coaching our leadership team, I said, you really have to think about providing some additional opportunities for those types of individuals to come on site. And maybe, you know, you can create venues where they're interacting with one group or this group, and just kind of share developing that FaceTime with folks. The other thing we do is we do have, you know, we'll do 2 to 4 all team meetings a year, and we try and have that coincide with a social event. And those have been very popular. So those bring people in. We'll have the whatever, you know, hour and a half, 2 hour, you know, all team meeting. And then, you know, we'll go out for a dinner or a barbecue, you know, something like that. So those have become, I think, kind of coveted opportunities that people have. So, and Kate, to your point, you know, we with out of staters, out of region. So we, you know, in my department alone, we have about 16 folks in like 9 different states. So we're on a goal to get one person in each of the 50 states. So we fly them in for that, what I just described, right? So they can attend the all team meeting live, they can attend the social event. And I think we just had it last week. We had our summer one, and I can see that it's having a positive impact on them. They're bonding. That's one thing. The out-of-staters are bonding, which I found interesting. But as well, we're all, you know, able to put the physical face, you know, name to a face, and it helps. It does help.
Yeah, I think it changes a relationship like significantly when you've met in person and you've had that like human contact.
Yeah.
But definitely bringing food always helps. Food and a few drinks.
Yeah, I think it's been like having your culture meter up, right? And having like it gets down, like, you know, all hands or get together, whatever else, but being way more thoughtful. But it is funny about one of the things you mentioned was kind of this revisionist history of what it was like before and how great it was. And it really wasn't that great, you know, lots of, you know, like the commute in.
Yeah.
It just was what it was. And now you're like, wow, I don't have that. And then you go back like, well, how did I do that? And so I think this idea of what, you know, the idea of things were what they were. What were you doing before? Can you apply that? If you can't, or it's not applicable, how do you reset what that looks like? You know, and I think this idea of culture, you can kind of chunk it, you know, being in person is one piece of culture.
Yeah.
It's not all of it.
Right.
You know, it's great to do if you can't do it, you know, because of flex work or not everyone being in the same place. You know, I think there's ways to be thoughtful around, you know, teeing up mentorships as a leader, being a little more thoughtful to have, you know, lean into a mentorship program a little bit more versus just an email that goes out that says, you know, we have a mentorship, like talk about it on your team. You know, who are you going to reach out to? If you're not comfortable, let me help you with that. I know that person, let me reach out, you know, and help broker it. So maybe going that extra step in some of these situations and being more thoughtful about it, you know, and specifically the in-person interaction. I think the other stuff, I'm sure, you know, Lincoln Laboratory, just like Akamai, like there's a lot of stuff that's carried on, you know, the leadership team, the people, the, you know, our legacy, our history, where we're headed, those things haven't changed.
Right.
And honestly, they what kept us together. And I think between COVID and, you know, with the market, you know, pressures that everyone's under, when times get tough, the organizations that have those things really stick out.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
People appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, your cultural, the strong aspects of your culture, right? You certainly would hope would keep you together, and I'm glad to hear that's true at Akamai. That was true. That's true for us as well. Very mission focused organization, and so we're all here unequivocally to support that mission, right? And so that keeps us all, level set and grounded.
Yeah.
But if I could take a moment, I wanted to go back to a point you made, Kate, because I found it very provocative to hear that from you, because I hear it from many staff members, many team members, and that is that balance that you expressed, right? Going to, I think you said one of your kids' games, or was it? Yeah. So this notion of work life, I think we used to call it balance. I'm not going to date myself now, Randall. I think it's called work life fulfillment now, right?
Oh,
so more than a balance, right?
Well done. Well played.
Yeah, so I want to be fulfilled in both aspects, right? I think that is like, I mean, for me, with my team, that was important to me prior to the pandemic, but I don't think that as a general, leadership culture, I'll just say that generically, that everyone had that same appreciation across industries and such. But I think when you see with the existing staff, and very much so with younger staff members coming in, they are thinking about this very differently.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I have a young couple next door. They have 3 young children, and they're both employed, and he's able to work at home, so that really helps full time. She was 4 days a week home. Now she's 2. She's 3 home. So she's at a point, right? If they ask me one more day to come back, I'm going to move on, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really kind of and I see the 2 of them. They both work really hard, and I think I see this in my own team members. Folks are asking, many of them, for like incredibly reasonable balance things, like I really enjoy walking my kindergarten daughter to the bus, and so therefore I really can't start at 8 o'clock in the morning, but I can at 9. That's all they're asking for.
I'll work an hour later.
Right.
Yeah. And there's a time where we're like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. We do 8 o'clock meetings. We're all changing. And I think that's really, really good, because I think it's necessary.
I agree. And it's such a positive, I will say again, life-changing difference in the way we operate now, which is incredible.
Staff are much happier overall.
Yeah, we all are. I am too.
No denial.
I think all the stuff, not that it's going to say that, well, I shouldn't say the studies are fake, but everybody wants this work-life fulfillment, right? And so, if they have that, they are more productive in their work. They're happier in their work. All the data supports that. It's kind of a win-win, right? It's really fun. It's so obvious in lots of ways that if you're happier with your work, you're probably going to be more productive and loyal and all those things. But I do think, leading to the future, I think, is about enabling that and empowering that and embracing it as much as you can, versus not that people are fighting it, but the worst thing that can happen, I think, is you go right back to where you were.
Right.
Yeah.
And I talked to a couple folks where it's, they're like, oh, we're getting back to where we were. And it's like, ooh, like, gosh, it seems like to your point, like I have a missed opportunity to take the best of both worlds, and link them for whatever your business, whatever works for the business, works for your employees, and works for you as a leader, or as someone that is leading teams. There is a middle ground there, or a balance that you can find. That's a really great place to settle in. I think that's kind of maybe that's the takeaway here, is find that within your organization,
right?
And embrace it.
Yeah, because I think companies that try to fight it and mandate in office 5 days are going to lose. They're going to not be able to retain or attain the best talent, and that would be unfortunate. So it's about celebrating it, embracing it. It's here.
Right.
Like I said, horses out of the barn.
Yeah, no question.
Good stuff. All right. Well, Bob, I think we're about out of time here. So really appreciate you coming on and providing, some great feedback around what you're doing within your organization. And Kate, always good to see you. And appreciate your feedback. Great. So hope everyone enjoyed the podcast. I think that was a pretty cool, fun conversation. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. I enjoyed it.